Hello, 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 and welcome back to another edition of Fan Talk. That is your favorite podcast by your favorite fan. That is, of course, me, Kyle Brenchley, in the house on this Wednesday. We're finally back to our normal Wednesday recordings of this podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you're new here, hello. Grab a seat on the couch. Let's flip on the TV. Let's flip on the YouTube TV 4-box, and let's watch some sports together. Fan Talks podcast by me, Kyle Brench, that you can find anywhere to get your podcast. And we just talk sports from the perspective of a fan. If you've been watching recently, you may know that I've been talking a lot of football the last, 7 months. So we'll take a break from football just this week before we get into one of my favorite things on this podcast, and that is the Fan Talk Super Bowl preview. We'll do that next week, so be sure to look out for that. Next week, I'll be talking about the matchup, obviously the Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs, a rematch of the Super Bowl in 2023. I'll have some fun trivia, some fun facts. We'll have a grand old time. That will be next week, the Fan Talk Super Bowl preview, so make sure you don't miss that. Today, we're switching gears. We're talking NBA basketball and one NBA diva. That and more on Fan Talk today. But first, hello, Rogue One. May the Force be with you. Star Wars. I am so impressed with Star Wars. 25 years into my life, it's still teaching me things and hitting me different every time I watch it. The candle's burning. We're out here having a great time here on this Wednesday. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the next 20 minutes. Will truly change your life for better or for worse. That is up to debate. But so, like I said, we're going to save football for next week. Let's talk NBA basketball. Have you guys even been paying attention to the NBA? I don't know about you, but personally, sometimes I feel, and football is my favorite sport to watch. So this might be different. You might be a big basketball guy, and I am too, but basketball might be your main sport, so you might have been following along. But I feel like the first couple months, in November, you're kind of like, oh, the NBA is back, and it's kind of like, ooh, awesome. But like the NFL is still in full blown. The college football regular season and playoff still going. I feel like November, December, it's not even until like mid-January, so maybe about 2 weeks ago, that you start paying attention to the NBA and college basketball, because college football ends and the NFL playoffs, kind of wrap up kind of here at the end of January. So a lot of people kind of shift over to basketball, and that is the case for me, but that may not be the case for you. I, of course, as a podcaster who loves sports, has been following it the entire time, but now the spotlight will definitely be on them, especially with the Super Bowl in a couple weeks. Once that ends, we'll jump into basketball. But if for some reason you have not been paying attention to the world of basketball, and we'll do a cool college basketball episode here in a few weeks, but let's do NBA today. Let me share with you, this is the power rankings currently, what teams are ranked where, and some of them may surprise you. I'll share my most surprising finds here in just a minute. One of them is the Oklahoma City Thunder are currently the number one ranked team in the power rankings. Power rankings, it's not like college. It's not like NFL. They're not ranked according to, the playoffs. Not yet quite. These are just kind of unofficial, who's the best team, who's the worst team, and they have a number associated with it. So if you're number 1, you're the best. If you're number 30, you're the worst. Number 1, the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, this is a young team that I love to watch. If you're not a big NBA fan, if you haven't watched a lot of NBA, you might have not watched this Oklahoma City Thunder team play. Now, when you think Oklahoma City Thunder, I personally think about Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook days. Those were some fun times about 11, 12, 13 years ago when they were both there and dominating the league and having putting up a lot of trouble out there in the West. Those days are long gone. Of course, Durant and Westbrook still in the league, but they're on different teams now. The Oklahoma City Thunder are now a very young team. I think the average age of the players on the team is like 23, and that I might be wrong. It might be more like 22. Very young team. Chet Holmgren, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They brought in Isaiah Hartenstein. All these players that maybe you do not know. If you do know who they are, then you know what I'm talking about. But a very good young team, fun to watch, so exciting. I'm excited to see if they can make a splash in the postseason. I'm a little nervous since young teams tend not to do well when it comes to the playoffs, but their record, as you can see, 37-8 right now. They've only lost 8 games the entire year. They always cover the spread. They always win the games they need to win. They are on fire right now. Another team that is very surprising to me, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, Cleveland has been good the last couple years, when Donovan Mitchell went there. The team has really been elevated by his play. They've added a lot of good players, some young players. Darius Garland, of course, hangs around. Jared Allen, Sam Merrill, who's got ties here to Utah, Utah State alum, Bountiful High alum, sharpshooter, 3-point shooter. Very good team as well, 37-9. Very surprising to me. This is another team where I would really like to see them have some postseason success, make it to the Eastern Conference champion, if not the NBA Finals. I just worry that come playoff time, they might not perform. But as of right now, they are doing very, very well. One of my surprises of this season thus far, 37-9, ranked at number 2. Of course, Boston, the usual suspects, coming in at 3. Memphis, now that Ja Morant is back, Jaren Jackson Jr., they're looking pretty good. They're currently sitting at number 4 in the power rankings, currently sitting at number 2 in the West. As you can see, Oklahoma City Thunder have like an 8-game lead on them in the win column, but they're looking really good. Houston Rockets as well. You can go through this entire list if you want to get more in depth about it. But I just want to share some teams that are surprising to me. The Phoenix Suns, little surprising to me. Now, I did an episode, probably been not quite a year ago, but I did an episode about NBA super teams. And I talked about how NBA super teams were really popular they started about, 10 years ago, maybe more like 14 years ago, 13 years ago at this point. Now that it's 2025, when LeBron teamed up with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade in Miami. It kind of started this little trend of just putting a bunch of superstars on the same team and see what happens. And some have worked and some have failed. I talked about how Kevin Durant has mostly been a part of failed super teams. I'd say the only success he's really had being a part of a super team was on Golden State. And some might argue that that might not necessarily have been a super team. Steph Curry, of course, a superstar. Kevin Durant, a superstar. But that third individual, is Klay Thompson really a superstar? I think he's a star. I don't think he's a superstar. But I talked about it in that episode. I talked about how Kevin Durant's been a part of a lot of super teams, but hasn't really worked out. And super teams are kind of, on their way out. I made that argument. The Phoenix Suns, currently a prime example of that. Devin Booker, superstar. Kevin Durant, a superstar. They brought in Bradley Beal to be the third guy. They're only 24-21. And they've actually been playing a lot better recently. Their record was worse. They had a losing record for, the first, I'd say, third of the season. So a little surprising there. They do look like they're on the upward trend. They have a favorable schedule ahead with, 2 games against Portland coming up down the pipe here in the next little while. But something interesting to watch there. Another surprise here, the Detroit Pistons seem to be finally putting it together. They had been abysmal for, ever, but for I think the last 6 seasons, 5 or 6 seasons, they were literally at the bottom. And they just kept getting really, top 5 picks, top 3 picks. And now eventually, a couple seasons in, they are showing what a team that tanks can actually do. A lot of people criticize them that they would just tank every year and they wouldn't get better. Tanking takes time. And unfortunately for the Pistons, it took maybe 2 or 3 seasons longer than they were expecting. Now, you look at a team like the Utah Jazz, you look at a team like maybe the Charlotte Hornets, these teams that perhaps are trying to tank on purpose, trying to get some good young players in there. It's going to be a couple years down the road, and you have to be patient with that if that's what you're going to do. I talked about that in an episode called My Beef with Tanking. You really have to commit to it, and you have to be patient, and it has to be for the long haul. It's not a decision to be made lightly. But the Pistons seem to be finally putting it together. I would like to see them in the postseason. They're currently sitting, I think, in the play-in slot, which means that they would have to play. They'd have to win to get into the postseason. Again, I'll talk about that. I have a video on it as well if you want to check it out. But surprising there. Other than that, I think everything is, pretty up to par. Maybe I'd say the Philadelphia 76ers having a rough year. They brought in Paul George. Tyrese Maxey's a great player. Joel Embiid is good when he plays. A miniature, I wouldn't call them a super team, but, they have a big three there. Not quite working out. Paul George is going to be injured for an extended period of time. Joel Embiid, of course, only plays half the time. Tyrese Maxey can only do so much. They're not looking good. 18-27. That's another surprise. Could be a very long year for Philadelphia. It already has been. But that's kind of the power rankings. You can, of course, go check those out. You can check out the standings, check out more news about the NBA. Right now, I want to talk about the trade deadline that's coming up. And specifically, I want to talk about one diva who's been causing a lot of commotion through the airwaves of the NBA. And this is a player that I adore. This is a player that I respect. This is a player that just motivates me. You just love to root for him. That is, of course, Jimmy Butler. And he is an absolute dog. I did a whole episode about Jimmy Butler 3 years ago or so. So go check that out as well. Jimmy Butler is not happy with his current situation in Miami anymore. That is the understatement of the year, but it's crazy. It's getting to the point where he's requested a trade. He's been suspended for the third time. Quote, this time it was for, let's see. The Heat said it was triggered by Butler walking out of practice after hearing the team plan to bring him off the bench. Ongoing drama that will continue to go. But so Butler's been... He's not feeling good. He's been suspended for the third time. Let's take a moment to look at his timeline of dysfunction. While the guy is a dog, while he is a baller, he has caused some drama on and off the court. So let's go through that now. So Jimmy Butler was actually drafted by the Chicago Bulls. He played with Chicago for 6 seasons. He started his career there. Great young talent. He was a star in the making, paired with Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah, if you guys remember those guys. Eventually, at a certain point, he clashed with those older players, and both Derrick Rose and Noah were traded away, and Jimmy Butler was the guy. He did sign a 5-year, $90 million max contract extension. The Bulls were like, this is going to be our franchise guy. But then as things happen, losses can get frustrated over the course of the season. You can lose your cool. Nothing ever goes quite according to plan. Jimmy Butler eventually got frustrated with the coach, with the GM, got frustrated with tensions in the locker room. Eventually he got fined, and eventually things just boiled over to the point where Chicago was like, we'll just move on from him because there's too much drama. So he was traded to Minnesota for Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and a couple other picks in 2017. Now, personally, I forgot that he was even on Minnesota. I didn't actually forget, but it's definitely a point in his career where I don't really think about that much. Minnesota, Jimmy Butler, teaming him up with Karl Anthony Towns. You think this would be a good pairing here. But unfortunately, there was some clashing, kind of the opposite of when he was in Chicago. Jimmy Butler was the young guy clashing with the old guys, Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah. In Minnesota, he's a little more seasoned now at this point, and he starts clashing with the young guys, Karl Anthony Towns, who was a rookie, of course, on the team at the time. And Jimmy Butler really only played 1 season with the Minnesota Timberwolves. They made the playoffs, but they lost. He turned down a 4-year extension, and then he requested a trade before the 2018-2019 season. So he did play half the year with Minnesota. They didn't get a trade done before then. He did play half the season, but then eventually they did agree to trade him to Philadelphia for a couple players there. So now he's in Philadelphia. He's teamed up with Joel Embiid. This could be something good, right? The Philadelphia 76ers made the playoffs that year. Of course, if you remember, this was the postseason where Jimmy Butler balled out. It was Kung Fu Jimmy, where he was wearing the ninja hat or the ninja bandana that they don't allow anymore. They made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, Game 7. Kawhi Leonard and the Toronto Raptors at the buzzer from the corner. Kevin Harlan on the call. I know you guys can hear it now. Ball hangs on the rim. It bounces in. Ends. The Philadelphia 76ers season, denies them a trip to the NBA Finals. Honestly, that was the closest they've been since that year. And then unfortunately, the thing was the Philadelphia 76ers decided that they saw more potential in Tobias Harris than they did in Jimmy Butler, and they wanted to bet on Harris more than they did on Butler. And Butler, being the, passionate and emotional guy that he is, did not take that very well. He's like, I'm the top dog. I want to be treated like the top dog. I don't want to be pushed to the back. I don't want to take a back seat to nobody. And so he said, okay, I need to go somewhere where I can be the guy. And luckily for him, South Beach was the spot. Dwayne Wade, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, they had all gone. Miami had gone through a couple of years of despair. Now they bring in Jimmy Butler. And Jimmy Butler, of course, still the same guy on the court, off the court. Great player, great success for the Heat. They made the postseason every single year he was there. They made it to the NBA Finals in the bubble, if you remember that one, that insane tournament. They went up against the Los Angeles Lakers and took the Lakers to 6 games. Lakers were such a better team, but the Heat were right there with them for 6 games. Jimmy Butler gave it all he had, left it all out on the court. And then in the subsequent years, made the postseasons, had that incredible run in the 2022 season where they went all the way to the NBA Finals and lost to the Denver Nuggets. But on the way, they took out the number 1 seed Milwaukee Bucks. They took out the Boston Celtics in 7 games. They took out the Knicks, all while being the 8 seed underdog. Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. To this day, I'm still so inspired by that playoff run, if I'm being honest. But still, he had problems with Eric Spoelstra. There was a lot of passion and arguments and a lot of passive aggressiveness. And eventually, when it came to 2024, this season, finally, these beefs finally got cooked, and Jimmy Butler was like, okay, I've been here. It's the same thing every year. I feel like I'm no longer the guy that, the Heat are giving extensions to these other guys. They're preferring younger players. It's the tale as old as time, And the Heat don't want to trade Jimmy Butler. They didn't want to trade Jimmy Butler, but Jimmy Butler was difficult, and he caused a scene, and he threw a fit. And so he forced the Heat's hand and said, I want out. And when a player wants out, you can't keep him. It's like in relationships. When one person wants out, if they've made up their mind, there's no convincing them to come back. That relationship is over because that person has made up their mind. Jimmy Butler is like the girl that you're just in love with. You want her to stay. You've been together for 5-6 years. You want her to stay, but she's lost interest. She doesn't feel valued. She doesn't want to be there anymore. She's checked out mentally. She's checked out emotionally. Her heart's no longer in it. She's made up her mind. There is no convincing her to come back. Hall & Oates, she's gone. Jimmy Butler's that girl. He's gone. And now the Heat have suspended him for the 3rd time. They're looking for a suitable trade option. Where will he land? He doesn't want to go to Memphis, even though Memphis is probably the team with the best shot at actually landing him. The Suns actually made a trade with the Jazz, clearing up some cap space and picks and whatnot. So the Suns might be a potential landing spot. If so, that would be very interesting because Jimmy Butler likes being the guy. How is he going to play with Kevin Durant, who needs the ball? How is he going to play with Devin Booker, who's too good not to have the ball? Bradley Beal is probably going to have to, get shipped off, in this trade. How is it going to work? Who knows? Let me know down below who you think would be a good fit for Jimmy Butler. The timeline continues. He wants to end his career with a good team. He wants to win a championship. He deserves it. He's done so much. And now he's got to just play well with others. He's got to put aside his pride. He's got to be humble. He's got to do the things he's got to do. Let's all take a lesson from Jimmy Butler. Let's not throw a fit. Let's not point fingers. Let's work well with others. Let's give others the benefit of the doubt. And hopefully all things work out for us. Hopefully things work out for Jimmy Butler. All right, guys. Thank you guys for listening and or watching. A little bit different of an episode today. But thank you. I wanted to get some basketball in here because we will be talking basketball very heavily in February and, of course, going into March with college basketball, and then April with NBA, May, NBA in the finals. So I wanted to sprinkle this in here. Don't forget, next week I'm doing the Fan Talk Super Bowl preview. It'll be real fun. We'll have games, we'll have trivia. I'll preview the game, I'll make my picks. It'll be super awesome. If you watched them in the past, you know that they're super fun, and I really look forward to it. So thank you guys so much for watching. Again, this is a podcast that you can find anywhere you get your podcasts. Feel free to like, subscribe, comment down below, share it with a friend, and I'll let you guys go. Thank you guys so much for listening to Fan Talk. I'll catch you guys next week for another edition of Fan Talk.